Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career. Today we have Coach Khan Apostolopoulos and Dr. Elia Gourgouris. Coach Khan is a performance and change management expert. He helps and consults organizations develop their people, improve their business results, and get the most from their talent management strategies. Dr. Elia is also known as the Happiness Doctor. He's a happiness and wellness expert and the founder of the Happiness Center, an organization of world-leading experts in the field of positive psychology. And together they've helped thousands of individuals, both personally and professionally, achieve happiness and success and wellness. Gentlemen, thank you for being on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So right now what's happening, what I'm seeing with either clients or anyone that I'm speaking with in business situations is when we work directly with leaders and we're focusing on, helping and empowering them in their mindsets, which is key. The trickle down effect is the work that you do not only affects the leader and how they present and show up for their teams, but it also empowers them in how they can train their team to have the same impact in mindset and leadership, especially as we're navigating kind of a lot of different changes and shifts, not only in the workplace, but also in the social, economical, the economic, as well as with everything going on in the world right now. So what are your perceptions right now when you speak with leaders, and how do you empower them to show up stronger for their teams?
So let me, first of all, again, thank you for having us on, Raul. It's a great opportunity for us to share some of the insights as we've talked to clients, as we've talked to Fortune 500 companies, and being able to bring that to your audience right now. I think the general consensus is from our clients and from the people that we interact with on different panels, thought leaders, is that there's a general uncertainty about how to proceed. A lot of leaders are finding themselves essentially naked out there. They're trying to apply what's worked in the past, but the old normal is gone. So what they're trying to deal with is, how do I now move into this new normal, or as we call it, the next normal? Because things will continue to evolve over the next year, year and a half, 2 years, and perhaps beyond that, as we progressively roll into this situation. So it's important for us to understand that there is a situation of flux. So we need to prepare accordingly and be prepared to move into this new phase of the situation, much more flexible, much more open to different solutions, holding on to the things that are important to us, but at the same time allowing all the rest to fall away and all the unnecessary things. Dr. Elia and I have been exploring a lot of the concepts of what we call the leadership paradox right now with a lot of our leaders, and trying to prepare them. It's important to understand that all these crises have done is essentially accelerate things that were going to be happening anyway. We've talked about a fourth industrial revolution. We've talked about a lot of the changes that need to happen from a leadership and business perspective. And all we're seeing now is an acceleration of those things. And perhaps we can talk about that more as we get into the conversation.
Well, I do want to touch on the point that even when my private conversations with clients as well, is that things that were going to happen 3 to 5 years from now are starting to have to happen now, because we've been kind of put in the corner that the shift has to happen, or changes had to happen that were going to happen, or leaders who were potentially planning to implement a solution or implement a new change, maybe 6 months down the line, are now forced into situations to act accordingly. And, action that's not perfect, but still action moving forward is better than no action at all. But can you talk to us a little bit more about the leadership paradox?
Well, essentially what we're referring to in that case is the need for leaders to step into a realm where they are synthesizing and almost combining what on the surface might appear as conflicting or very opposite ideas.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When we dispersed our workforce out, we said, okay, everybody go home and work from there.
Mhm.
All of a sudden now we're in a situation where leaders have to still be empathetic and understand the fears, the concerns that their staff may have, the
Yes.
uncertainty that brings about. And even if they're trying to bring them now back into the office, there needs to be empathy. People have understandable fears, some more than others. So on
Mhm.
one hand, you've got the concept of being an empathetic leader and an understanding leader. And then on the other hand, you still have to be focused on tough love, making sure that people don't overdo it in one direction or another. One of the things that we found is people were dispersed, they were sent home, and all of a sudden they're working ridiculous hours as part of an escape, honestly,
Yeah.
or because they feel guilty because they're at home, all of a sudden they feel like they have to prove something. So leaders have been forced to step in and actually set boundaries and say, no, you know what? Hey, I need you to log off because you're going to burn yourself out this way. This is not going to be over in a day or two. So because we're in this for a longer term, I need you to pace yourself. I need you to, here's the procedures, here's the structure. So providing that tough love combined with the empathy, these are conflicting pieces. Another example might be, we might not be able to, for a lot of our clients, for example, the supply chain might be impacted.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we can't bring or export goods. Well, we can't do that with goods because of the restrictions. We can't move people across borders a lot of times, but what we can do is move data. So in many ways, what we're looking at essentially is, so we want to globalize our digital aspect of things, but localize a lot of the work that we're doing, the distribution of things and everything else, source locally, look locally for those kind of things. Again, very different, conflicting on the surface ideas that we now have to focus on and make sure that we do. A third example of that might be we're increasing the technical piece. All three of us are here sitting on a high-tech platform right now, being able to talk as if we're in the same room, but we're not. So on one hand, we have to focus on bringing the technology to the forefront and invest in those things as business leaders. But on the other hand, we also need to increase that human touch so people don't feel isolated.
And I want to dive into each of those points, but as you mentioned in the beginning, I love Dr. Elia's insights here is maintaining the well-being, not only just physical, obviously, but also the happiness factor and the mental well-being of remote staff, of your workers, because for most, this is an entirely new situation. So Dr. Elia, what are you seeing on your side, and what are some of the things that you've implemented for or helped teach, Fortune 500, 100 companies?
So the first thing is, from a big picture perspective, for senior leaders, for the C-suite or for HR directors and VPs and so on, if you think that you can continue doing things business as usual that existed prior to the pandemic, even if those things made you successful prior to the pandemic, and you think you could continue doing those things during this time and have similar positive results, you're sadly mistaken. We flat out need to be flexible and adaptable because we're living in an entirely different world than we did 6 months ago. And the people that are able to have that adaptability and that flexibility are going to thrive, not to survive this crisis, but they're going to thrive. And organizations that do that as well. About a month ago,
the principle, right? The principle, right, of being flexible even throughout. And that's a key term thing because it's not just thriving right now for the short term, but also you mentioned even beyond this.
Yeah, when we talk with leaders, we're a big picture. Like think about big picture, don't think about for the next 30 to 60 days. And the example, the analogy that we use is when it comes to flexibility, we talk about the oak tree and the palm tree. The oak tree, if you think about it, symbolizes what? Strength. It's huge, it's massive, it's been around for 100 years, immovable in a lot of ways. But in a storm, in a perfect storm, if there's enough moisture that saturates the ground, and if there's enough wind, what happens to oak trees? They come crashing down on cars, people, homes, and so on. That's what happens to them. On the flip side, the palm tree, at the peak of the storm, 150 miles an hour, what happens? It bends, and it continues to bend, sometimes parallel to the ground. But once the storm passes, guess what? The palm tree rises again. Why is that? Because it's flexible. So people say, well, that's the way I am. I've always done things this way. This is how we do things. Well, guess what? That's an oak tree mentality. And what happens is that you will break. If you, in human terms, think about in sports. any major league baseball, NFL, NBA, whatever. What do elite athletes, these are the best of the best in the world, right? There's 300 in each league, more or less. Half an hour before the game starts, what are they doing out in the field? What do they do before the game starts? They stretch, right? Because if you don't stretch and if you're not flexible, guess what happens? You're going to pull a hamstring. Now we're talking about a corporate hamstring if you don't do that. So I just wanted to plant the seed that we have to think in a completely different way. In terms of the self-care, there was a study, 15,000 HR executives. What are the biggest concerns organizations are having right now? The number one need right now is to ensure the mental and physical well-being of their employees. We both know that a year ago, that wouldn't even make the top 10 of concerns for organizations. Now it's number one. And then the second one, of course, is to ensure employee engagement, productivity, and effectiveness.
That's huge.
Well, guess what? It's huge. But you can't get to the number two until you ensure number one.
Yeah.
Before it was the other way around. Employee engagement, productivity, and effectiveness has always been number one.
Yeah.
Not anymore. So we really, I guess what we're sharing with you, Coach Khan and I, is that we need to step up in terms of our compassion, our kindness. The workforce has been traumatized already. Some of them have lost loved ones. Some of them have had loved ones get sick. Some of them have concerns because they have elderly parents at home or a sick child that has a deficient immune system and so on. So when they come back, you can't say, look, you got to hit the numbers roll or else at the end of the month, you're going to be gone. That doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, that's the empathy piece as well. And you mentioned earlier as well, and I want to dive a little deeper into this, is what are some of the areas that you think, I know that this is super general, but what are the areas that you suggest leaders lean into in terms of flexibility? What are the key areas that they can actually adapt from this conversation here?
Coach, go ahead.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it. When we look at our performance of our employees, we talk about productivity, like we're talking about with Dr. Elia, and still that remains a high concern for people. I mean, organizations at the end of the day are responsible, accountable to their stakeholders, to their clients, to their customers, to their employees. You cannot really maintain any sort of well-being and job for people if you can't keep your doors open as a business owner.
Correct.
I mean, you look at a lot of the restaurant industry, for example, that's had to find different ways. Many of them are shutting down because they haven't been able to adapt and flex. But what's happening now in environments like that, let's take in point some of the clients that we have in the restaurant business. What they're seeing is that they're turning what used to be, for example, servers, staff that used to serve, into a dining room that no longer exists. They're turning them into delivery people. They're taking their space that was crowded in the back of the house, for example, where all the cooking happens in the prep of meals, and they're expanding that into the now unused space of the dining room. Why? So they can social distance, so they can expand their footprint in there. They're taking advantage of that space that they can no longer utilize. Or they're negotiating with their local municipality and saying, can we use the sidewalk now to allow for us to social distance? All of these things show innovation, flexibility that's required at a time now where we still have to, as business leaders, still try to function and perform and deliver on what? On productivity. We're focused more on the results, on the performance, on the outputs, rather than how we deliver that. So that becomes an important part of change in mindset. In the past, we used to wear it as a badge of honor. Oh, I put 80 hours a week this week in there. I put 100 hours last week. We're looking at ourselves, we're driving ourselves to the ground as if it's a badge of honor, as if it's something we're going to put on.
Yeah. And Coach, let's talk about Siemens, this German, massive company, 380,000 employees. Their CEO came out last week and said, look, and we're talking about a huge company that's across the globe, right? They said only two things to all their employees. This was a message to all their employees. We care about outcomes, not productivity. You get your job done in 4 hours, go and play with your family and be done. Outcomes, not productivity, not are you 10 hours in front of the computer or else, and we're checking on you, number one. And number two, we trust you and we empower you to get the job done. And that's it. A very simple message, basically two directives. We trust you and we empower you, and focus on getting things done. Don't worry about how much time you're spending in front of your computer. To the remote workforce, right? Think about what that does to the employee. I mean, 380,000 employees across the globe, good-sized city, basically, right?
It's
And
a
it's got that
shift in
message.
mindset, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm hoping that other CEOs, smaller companies, not as as big as that, take that, listen to what this guy is saying, and copy it, like copy paste that message and send it out to your own employees, whether you have 100 employees, 1,000 or 10,000, let alone 380,000 employees. I love that message. That's the new kind of leadership. That's what Coach Khan and I are talking about. That's what we want to share with other people too, and other companies and organizations. Simple message. Don't complicate it. Don't give 10 directives. 2 outcomes, trust, empowerment, period. That's it.
No, I love that. And I want to like capture a lot of this, all these like nuggets into one, because what I'm seeing is that if you're a business owner right now, you're looking at strategy. You're looking at how do we do the things that we need to do. So I would look at those as different buckets. I need this to be done, and these like 3 to 5 things. That these are the 3 essential things for my company or my business, right? So you can compile it down to 3 to 5. From there, and then based on what Coach Khan said, like your clients in the restaurant industry, it's looking at what initiatives need to be done, but also allocating the assets. If it's human capital, if it's like your team, if it's your delivery systems, allocating them in the way, shifting them as needed in order to fulfill those outcomes. Obviously, training needs to be there, but I think the key thing here also is the trust factor. Like, we're here for you, we're going to empower you, we're going to train you, give you the resources. And I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, running online teams myself, those were the 2 things when I would hire. That's actually the part that I wrote in Productive Profits was we care about results. We make sure that you get the results done. And 2, we'll help you and empower you. But I love the fact that you mentioned it's how do you condense your strategy into something that's super easy to understand, but also easy to communicate across teams. And how have you seen that help teams shift in terms of not their culture is going to change, but their attitude towards the company? Have you seen the change manager? How do you shift that perspective of the mindset of the employees?
Yeah, and I think it's too early to do that because companies are not just opening up. And as you know, there's a good, I would say, a third of employees that are not going to come back to work physically until there's a vaccine. So we're talking about 2020, and you can't force them to come back either. By the way, I wanted to add something about the restaurant that you talked about, Coach Khan. There's some restaurants that had the oak tree mentality, which was, hey, you know what? We're a serious restaurant. We're 5 stars. We're a sit-down restaurant. Guess what happened to those people? Their doors have been closed for 6 months. There are other restaurants that used to be that way. Say, you know what? If our customers can't come to us because of physical distancing, then we're going to come to them. And they became a delivery restaurant when they've never delivered food before, and they're thriving, and their doors are still open. That's a very simple example of what it looks like when you pivot from the old ways to the new ways.
Coach Khan, were you going to add anything?
No, and I totally agree from that perspective. But the changes that we're talking about right now, 20 years ago, Raul, I was operating in a call center environment before they became contact centers. And the 2 factors that we just mentioned here, I just want to reiterate that because it is important for business leaders to understand. 20 years ago, we made the business case of how to operate with remote workforce and virtual teams. And the 2 factors that got in the way was trust from leadership and technology.
It's huge.
Those 2 factors. We saw it that even with the people that were willing to volunteer and work remotely, they really appreciated that. You would have a management team that says, send me pictures. I want to see how your workstation is set up. Does it meet our standards? What about this? What about that? You need to log in at this time. You need to check out at that time. You need to do. There was no trust from that piece. Now they're forced to trust because they didn't have a choice if they wanted to keep their doors open. So all of a sudden, the workforce has earned that trust now because they've proven that they can be just as productive. And again, like we said, the technology is there now. We can do this. We can have those virtual teams. Again, it's like we're in the same room right now having a conversation, the 3 of us, even though we're miles apart. So these things can still happen from that perspective.
And I think what you mentioned as well with trust, and I think lack of trust is lack of accountability, which is a leadership fault. So what are some of the ways that you're seeing that accountability works right now during this transition?
So let's combine those 2 concepts that we just talked about right now. Again, a paradoxical piece. We want to talk about trusting, enhancing that trust, allowing that trust to happen. But that trust has to happen when you've laid out clear expectations.
True.
Accountability and empowerment go hand in hand. They're two sides of the same coin. So if we're able to clearly articulate what we expect of our workforce, like Dr. Elia said, the Siemens CEO came out and says, can you do your job? You said that to your team. Can you do your job? This is what I expect you to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
How you get there, whether you do it in 4 hours or in 8, that's on you. If you get done in 4 hours, you can go play with your kids. If you do it in 8, I still expect you to get it done within that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So the expectations are very, very clear. That's a key part of running any virtual team when you have that situation. On the other hand,
the beauty, Coach Khan, that's the beauty of that CEO's communication skills. He made it crystal clear what was expected. He didn't complicate things.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, now go out and do it and watch what happens to that company. Right. Sometimes we communicate in a way that we really complicate things. People are already stressed out. In America, anyway, you have 800% increase in mental health stressors, which obviously includes employees too. Depression, anxiety, and stress are through the roof.
Yeah.
So having said that, don't add more stress into their lives. They're already stressed out. And work has to become now something that the ones that come to work, and HR is having a hard time with that. There are some people in the workforce, you're going to have meetings, actual meetings, physically present meetings, where half the room is like they're wearing masks, and the other room are not wearing masks. And the one half says, you know what, I feel like even with social distancing within the room, you're jeopardizing my health. And the other half is saying, you know what, this is America. Don't tell me what to do. I'm not sick. I'm not coughing. Leave me alone. So that's a real issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
How will we be able to navigate that so that it becomes a win-win, that it's both respectful without infringing upon people's rights? These are things that had never occurred to anyone before, right, in the workforce. New challenges. So we have to come up with new solutions with empathy, understanding, compassion for one another, even if we have different views. You know how divided this nation is on all kinds of levels. So we have to come together for the common good within organizational structures, just like a family would. You know, you have a family meeting and you work things out and you do it with love and understanding.
And especially even if you're a large company, just like the division that you manage or the team that you work with. And I think this ties really well with the book. So I read your book, The 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. But when you look at the chapter titles, we're talking a lot of what would be called like quote unquote softer side, like self-care or being flexible, preparing, and also positive attitude. But that is probably the most important piece to executing the hard metrics, to executing, hitting those numbers, is taking care of, obviously yourself, and obviously making sure that those around you are well, having the awareness if you need help to reach out, right? So I want you to dive a little bit more into like the reasons of why you wrote the book and how it's impacted people. But I love the fact that it focuses on, it's simple to read, first of all. Second, it's actionable. You have like exercises, do this, do that. And they're like little exercises that you can do, like little games. But also, what I see sometimes leader might miss the mark is we're working even in the remote team, right? Because like you can send a chat message or a Teams message or a Slack message and like, I need to do this by tomorrow, right? And you're talking to a computer, but sometimes we miss the mark that there's another person on the other side of that screen. And I really wouldn't talk to them like that in person, right? So how have you seen that correlate with what you've seen in the market or your clients and who you're speaking with?
So first of all, at the very beginning of the book, we created a personal health assessment. It's a survey, 20 questions. You can do it in less than 2 minutes. That basically looks at your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual self, and how well you're doing in those areas before you even start reading the book or applying any, all the take action. So immediately, maybe maybe physically I'm in really good shape. Maybe I'm exercising more because I have more time now, but mentally and emotionally I'm drained and stressed out and so on. Mm-hmm. So you get a number. Let's say you get a 62 out of 100. You go through the book, you do all the exercises, you practice the self-care, and at the end, when you're done, you retake it to see, because soft skills are not easy to measure, like you said.
Yeah.
But guess what? Soft skills are more necessary now than they ever have been before. Mm-hmm. In corporate America, in organizations, and in our own personal lives.
And let me kind of interject here and kind of carry that message forward, Raul. When we wrote the book originally, we wrote it to help individuals. It was our way of
Right.
giving back in the midst of a crisis when people were looking for answers. We didn't try to write an academic book or a scientific book. We wrote a book straight from the heart, as Dr. Elia says, in a way that resonates with the average person. We wanted to make sure that everybody that needed some practical advice could get it in an easily consumable format. What we've realized since then, now that we've had some time to step back and realize that this isn't going anywhere soon, that we need to now adapt to this next normal. I mentioned to you that leaders are finding themselves without answers. They're finding themselves naked out there. So we're taking those same concepts, the ones that you mentioned as soft skills, and really taking that out and extrapolating it. We're talking about the cornerstones of effective change management, performance management, and also emotional intelligence. So essentially, if we elevate these concepts and pull them out a little bit, what does this mean for business leaders? Well, when we talk about self-care for an individual, it looks like what Dr. Elia was just describing about looking at your personal health assessment. When we look at it from an organizational standpoint, we're developing the same sort of tools on the organizational level. So now you're talking about an organizational assessment. How are you doing? What is the response from your workforce? Who's reluctant to come in? Who's feeling okay and ready to go? Who's not? So we look at all of those factors. How are we doing against our strategic plans? Where are we doing? Are we still getting the numbers, but at what cost? Do we have a body count? Literally at this point, from this perspective, we go through and we look at awareness. Awareness is mindfulness. It's a self-reflective activity of emotionally intelligent beings, of people. We look at that on the individual scale. Now, in a corporation, that's part of what we do when we do our engagement surveys to kind of get the pulse check, have focus groups, talk to our leaders, formal and informal leaders within the organization, and go saying, what's really going on? How are you guys doing?
Do you really, exactly. Do you really know how your employees are doing? You need to know that right off the bat before we come in and offer a solution that's, a canned solution that we do anyway. Let's find out where the points of pain is and what keeps them up at night. And then we can address that specifically so we can be very direct to their challenges that they're having. Not for us to go and sell a program just because we've done it before. Right. Where are your pain points as an organization? Most folks have no idea. They have no idea. They're taking not even educated guesses. They think they know. So we come in and we say, let us find out. Let me dig exactly how your folks are doing.
So we'll take that concept then. We progress to flexibility. We talked about that just now. Are we focusing on the right outputs from our workforce, regardless if they're in the office or outside? What are the must-haves that we need to do to keep going? Let the rest fall away, be flexible for that, focus on the productivity and enhance the controls. And then we progress into the other keys. For example, preparation and initiative, the two that go hand in hand there, side by side. Well, preparation, every business should have a business continuity plan, a risk management plan. Where's yours? But you know what? Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face. And let's face it, we just got smacked in the face big time here, all of us, from business leaders. Dr. Elia and I had cancellations. We had speaking engagements. We had workshops that we were going to deliver. All of a sudden, everybody's like, you know what? Sorry, we got to put this on hold. That's something that we needed to be prepared for. So we shifted gears. Our preparation was, do we have multiple revenue streams to be able to pursue or avenues to reach our clients? We can't do executive coaching side by side with the person anymore. But you know what? I can do it remotely now through Zoom calls or other virtual media that we have. And you know what? Oh, by the way, it's not just the person that's within driving distance or flying distance that I get to talk to somebody on the other side of the world right now. And we do coaching sessions across the globe. That's preparation now that becomes initiative. Because the minute you start acting on things is the minute you start gaining control back. For the individual, that means my mindset, whatever else. Doctor?
Honestly, neither one of us had any plans of writing a book this year. We were busy. We had stuff to do. But when everything goes away, we pivoted. And that's what we're asking leaders to do, to pivot and became navigators in essence. I think, we've talked in the book about, the 4 personality types when dealing with a crisis. But I also want you to think about on the organizational level as well. The first one, of course, being the victim. Why is this happening to me? Poor me, right? And then you have the critic that basically criticizes everything. Raul, you should wear a mask when you go outside. Well, that's stupid. Okay, Raul, never wear a mask when you go outside. What are you trying to kill me? So no matter what happens, you're criticized. And then the bystander mode of operating, which basically is the deer with the headlights look, frozen in fear in essence, not knowing what to do. You know. And then, of course, you have the navigator, which is the whole premise of the book, who starts with self-care, is aware, is adaptable and flexible, takes some initiative with a positive attitude, and in the end helps those around them because their own batteries are full and they're capable of doing that. Well, that whole process applies to corporations and organizations as well. So people will say, well, am I my brother's keeper? We both have had pushback from people that said, I'm so stressed, I'm drowning, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed out. And if at the end of your book, you're asking me to go out and help somebody else, are you crazy? I can't even take care of myself. We issue this challenge, and they're like, what am I, my brother's keeper? We're like, no, you're not your brother's keeper. You're your sister's keeper and your mother's keeper and your cousin's keeper and your employee's keeper and the janitor's keeper and the homeless person or somebody across the world. Because if you're listening to the message of this podcast right now, if you're a listener, I guarantee you're better off than somebody else. And we're here to help somebody else. How does this work with a direct report within an organization? Is this? It's no longer enough to say, Raul, how you doing, man? And you saying fine, and then I go about my way. No, I'm going to ask you to make eye contact, even if it happens through a Zoom call. And I'm like, you know what? The door is closed. It's just the two of us right now. How are you really doing? How's your family? How's your wife? How are your kids? You know, is there anything we can do as a company to make your work-life balance better during this very stressful time? That's compassion. That's what it looks like. And that's what leaders need to do. Not just superficially kind of say, hey, how you doing, man? You're doing good. Okay, get to work now. That doesn't cut it anymore. No, I'm serious.
No, that is so true. No, that is so true. Because that is, it's breaking through, going back down to the human element. And it's also just being real. Because if you're doing it for fakes, like you mentioned, the team is going to see it. It's going to suffer the culture. They're going to feel like you don't care about, or the team doesn't, you don't care about the team, et cetera, et cetera. But it's like circling it back. You mentioned situational awareness. Where am I at? Where's the team at? What's the pulse? What's the baseline? What's my strategy? How can we adapt? But also, how are the people, because any great company has great people. How are my people doing and actually caring?
Let me jump in on this one, because this is an important point. You mentioned that every company has good people, and that's so true. Those handful of people that really make the organization in many ways. What we've noticed is, as a knee-jerk reaction, as a cost-cutting measure, because a lot of organizations panicked, they cut a huge slice of their workforce.
Yeah.
And in many ways, without thinking about it, they basically said, okay, we no longer need this department because we're not going to do that. So now all of a sudden, they're cutting not just the fat, they're cutting into muscle now, if we want to make that physical metaphor from that piece. So now all of a sudden, the cuts are too deep, and you've got very good people now out looking for a job. You've got talent out there. If you're a smart organization, you're looking at really upgrading your team right now. You're grabbing that talent that all of a sudden got released out there, and you're planning for the future. You're bringing that talent on board. Now is the time to really invest in the high tech that's going to get you there, but the high talent as well, the high potential that's going to come in and bring your organization to that next level. Because guess what? Employees remember.
Yeah.
The pendulum swings both ways. The companies that are empathetic and recognize, and like Dr. Elia said, on an organizational level, are saying, how are you doing? Let's get through this together. I know clients that brought their teams in and said, how are we going to deal with this? Leaders weren't expected to have all the answers. They asked their key players within their workforce, that talent that many released, and said, how are we going to get through this? What do you recommend? What ideas do you have? Let's put our heads together. Leadership and workforce, let's put our heads together and let's figure that out. That is a smart leader. That's somebody who's preparing for the long term to upgrade their talent, and they're the ones that are going to navigate through this chaos and thrive on the other side of this.
Absolutely.
So let me piggyback on that real quick, Coach Khan. We differentiated very clearly. There's a big difference between danger and fear. Danger is real. If somebody coughs in our face, we're in danger. Fear, however, is not your friend, because you don't want to make organizational decisions based on fear, or anymore you want to make personal decisions based on fear. The folks that Coach Khan talked about, who not only are not laying people off, but they're going after talent that now exists, because the labor market used to be so tight before this, you couldn't find anybody who was good because they were already hired.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? So many people are unemployed right now. There's great talent out there. The ones that are actually leaning into the stress, leaning into actually and spending money to bring those talented people who are now available into their own organizations are going to thrive afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
But they're making those decisions not based on fear.
It's a strategic move. It's an investment. I think seeing it as an investment, because you might not see the immediate recoup. And obviously, you have to have the resources and the savviness to not spend more than you got. But it's an investment for the next year, the next 3 years.
Right.
That's a very smart move.
Correct.
It's almost like, free agency, right? There were all these free agents. Like everybody became a free agent in baseball. And now if you're a team owner, man, I'm going to go after them because, before I couldn't bring anybody on the team, and I'm rebuilding my team with the best talent available out there. That's very strategic. That's somebody who believes in their company, believes they're going to cut. In other words, they have a positive attitude about, we're going to overcome this together.
Yeah.
And the revenue is going to be there. And I want to have the best players on my team.
It's a growth mindset.
It's a growth mindset.
And I love the fact that you mentioned I have such confidence in our product, in our service, in our team. And that I think would instill even more of a positive team culture for the entire organization.
Right. So you can take that investment that you would have done for that office expansion that you no longer need because you're probably going to need half of the space you had before, and take that and invest it in the technology and the people. When we talk about a growth mindset, think about the training investment that you need to do. Because as we move into this new situation with next normal and the next normal and the next normal, one of the most important skill sets that for leaders and for our team members, for the talent that we have, is the ability to learn, unlearn, and then relearn. Because that's essentially what's going to be happening. As our reality changes, as the normals change from one to the next, we need to leave the old paradigms behind. And we need to unlearn what we know, and then go forward and learn something new. That's the difference between the oak tree and the palm tree mentality that Dr. Elia talked about. If you are rooted into that old way of doing things, that no longer exists. While you're out there waiting for your Polaroid thing to dry out, the other person has taken 1 million digital photos. So you're going to be eaten alive. There's a lot of relics out there from oak tree companies that really didn't adapt.
And one more thing that I wanted to add to that is, as we work with HR directors, is this: the employees that are coming back to work, they're being, when you have a new employee, you onboard them to the new company culture and you explain everything and you give them a computer and a desk and all that stuff. Okay, existing employees right now are being re-onboarded.
Oh, for the new transition,
Absolutely. They have to be re-onboarded. And that's new. Nobody has re-onboarded existing employees before. That's never happened in the history of corporate, anybody. Right. But now, because they're coming into and I know people don't like the world, new normal, next normal, whatever. It's not the same it was 6 months ago. How's that? Let's leave it at that.
It's practical.
Exactly. We have to re-onboard, and that's what we help organizations to help HR professionals re-onboard their existing employees as they're coming back to work.
Our ancestors used to say, Raul, that you can never step into the same river twice. One part of it is because you are never the same as you progress, but the river moves on as well. It's the same now as we go with this workforce. As they're coming in, they've been changed by the situation. If you've been sitting at home for 60 days, your mindset has changed. You're not the same person that left. And you go into an office environment now all of a sudden on certain days, and you're required to kind of come in. Well, that office itself has changed. I visited the first time I went out to a client after they started reopening. It took me a half an hour to get through the screening and everything else and filling out forms and going through the temperature checks and all that stuff just to get into the office. You look at those changes right now, that's a very different environment. And even the most adaptable, open-minded person, when you're confronted with somebody with a thermometer gun and saying good morning to you, that's a change that you need to adapt going into your workforce. So most of us are not used to working in the hazmat environment. Let's put it that way.
100%. And that bleeds into a lot of the new era of leadership, the new era of understanding and empathy. And it's not like the principles have changed. They don't change, but it's how we're adapting those principles to our current situation. I absolutely love that. But I think because both of you have such tremendous value to add, I'd love to know individually, what's the best way for listeners to thank you for this episode?
We're just grateful to be here. Go ahead, Coach. You go first.
Well, from our perspective, if we're always willing to share what we know and how we can help others from that perspective. Probably the easiest way for people to reach out to us, to find us and things like that from that perspective. One way is through LinkedIn. Just look us up on LinkedIn. For myself, it's Coach Khan under LinkedIn. Dr. Elia is the happiness doctor, as we mentioned. We both have our websites and everything else. For me, it's freshbizsolutions.com. For Dr. Elia, it's the Happiness Center.
Mm-hmm.
And these are good ways for people to just reach out to us directly. If they're struggling, if they're looking for practical answers, get the book, 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. It's a practical guide, not just to navigating emotionally dealing with this pandemic, but any crisis that we might deal with our lives.
And I wanted to share a real example from the corporate world. Just about 3 weeks ago, I was asked to speak to some employees of Bank of America in New York, how to navigate through this crisis while maintaining, employee happiness and wellness. Initially, I thought, I asked them, I said, how many do you think there would be on? 300, 700, over 1,000 got registered. I did my webinar, got done. Now, corporately, that message is going out to 200,000 employees because it isn't just New York. It's the whole country. And, we're doing webinars internationally now. India, interviews in South America. This is impacting everybody, regardless of how big the company is, whether it's profit, non-profit, government entities. I mean, you name it, because the issues are exactly the same. Why? Because all these issues have to do with people.
Yeah.
And people are struggling. So the soft skills are, again, more necessary than ever. And we as leaders just have to up our game. We as coaches and as leadership consultants have to up our own game, honestly. We're not doing things like we used to do before. But on the plus side, of course, we're having more opportunities now than ever. Like both Coach Khan and I, literally, we're like what we're doing right now with you. This happens every single day from some part of the world. People are reaching out and saying, we need your message of positivity, flexibility, love, concern, empathy, but we will overcome this. This is not the end of us, and we will be better for it. I truly believe companies and organizations, if they put into use some of the things that we share about and that they're also doing on their own, of course, it's not like we have all the answers, but obviously the CEO of Siemens didn't ask me to get, he had a great idea on his own. But if we do those things, we will be better off, and employees will be better off. They'll have a better balance, I believe, and productivity will return and profitability will return.
Yeah.
And we just have to stick together and help one another. I mean, that's it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even if you are still maintaining a good wave, you're already profitable, you're already doing well, even during this, it's ensuring that you can endure, because it's a long-term play, It's
an evolution, Raul. Even if you're on the right track, you're going to get run over if you're not moving. That's what Will Rogers used to say. So for many organizations, they're starting to get their footing under them, but they still have a lot of unanswered questions. Reach out, find a trusted source to reach out and ask for guidance during this time. Don't try to do it all yourself. Whether that expertise comes from your workforce itself, from somebody you trust on your advisory board, or for example, here with us, we have answers that we can share with them from other organizations or from other industries even, what's been working. Our job as experts in the field is to go out, collect that information, talk to other people, gather an expertise, gather a thought leadership approach, and then bring it back to our clients. That's the value that a good partner can bring to that. Through coaching your senior leadership team, to delivering information directly to your workforce for you. Whatever the case might be, we have the opportunity to help when you need answers. And that's where we can be of value to our partners. And that's where the implementation piece comes in. People have the ideas. Sometimes they just don't know how to implement it.
And they always need help for their specific situation. No, I love that. So I'll have all of your contact information in the show notes. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Raul. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for the opportunity.